Hi, welcome to Quirky Queen's Journals. My name's Kirsten. So today I am doing an abstract mixed media flower painting on A4 size 300 GSM watercolour paper. So I've gathered together some plastic flowers from around the house and I've made a sort of bouquet that sit there in the corner. Now I only use it to do the line drawing. After that, I just go rogue and ignore it. So this is a Rembrandt soft pastel in a kind of olive green colour. I will put a list in the description of all the supplies and colours I used. The soft pastels aren't labelled, so I just kind of try and guess what colour of green it is. This is definitely an olive type. Anyway, I'm off at a tangent. So what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get the big shapes. That's it. There's no detail. And what I'm actually looking for as well is I'm trying to... Obviously, the three big blue flowers are... Everything's kind of going to be around them. But what I'm trying to look for is more interesting shaped leaves, and also to have, because I'd grouped those plastic flowers together to begin with, I had a kind of composition to start with and I could centre it slightly off, and I had it all going up in a sort of angle towards the top right hand corner. Just wee things that made it a bit easier to begin with, rather than drawing it from my head. Could have drawn it from a picture as well, though. I like this. It made a nice change. And it made me realise that I need to dust the flowers a bit more as well. Anyway, so that's my contour drawing. And that's it. So the intention at the start was to stay very loose and just keep it quite abstract, quite loose, use it as a way of practising, using a variety of colours, keeping it bright, trying not to get too muddy with the colours as well. Just really a good, strong practice piece. And I actually really liked how it turned out in the end. So there's some little pink flowers in that bouquet as well. And one thing I do try to do is, I'm still using the soft pastels. I try to, so all the pink flowers are at the top. And what I will do is I'll try and mix that pink in with another colour. Just so it's within somewhere else in the picture. But obviously it's not coming across as pink. So these are the Kuretake Art Nouveau watercolours. This is pea green, I think. It's a lovely, bright, fresh green. I think it's very, it's like the light hitting off the leaves. It's very much that type of colour. And this is ivy green. So at the moment, I'm kind of going over what I did before, but not really. I'm not creating new shapes as such, but I'm also not just, I'm kind of adding more interest to what's already there. That's the plan anyway. I'm being very loose. I'm purposely using a very big brush. I like the way that the soft pastel will blend in areas as well. The two leaves at the bottom are very big. And I am trying to kind of keep them as if they're sticking out and the light's hitting off them. So while we've got the three big blue flowers, the leaves are the bottom two leaves are very important as well. Now this is crisp apple Windsor and Newton ink. and it's lovely, and it just blends right into that wet watercolour, and it just makes a lovely edging on the line, and it is quite leaf-like, you know, with the delicate veins. And I'm just putting on some very thin suggestion of other leaves in the background with it. Now, I do use a lot of greens in this picture. I just kind of went for it. This is another soft pastel. I'm trying to give that basket look, but I actually made it look like a clay pot, which I much prefer, and I was really happy with. So my top tip for drawing a clay pot, try to draw a basket. With regards to like shadows and light, I'm not very good. My brain just doesn't want to understand where the light's coming from and where shadows, etc. should be. So I kind of thought, well, that leaf looks like it could be shadowing more on the left side. So I've kind of done the shadow along the whole bottom, but made it slightly larger at the left side. I feel it looks natural enough. Now I'm just adding some watercolour paint on top of the soft pastel and the pink flowers. Now here I'm doing a bit of negative painting. This is white, but it's white with bits of watercolour and soft pastel getting rubbed into it, so it loses the stark whiteness and it starts to take in some, you know, you get some subtle tones coming through it, and it helps bring a bit of cohesion because we're getting some of the colours that are actually in the main painting into that white. This is actually quite not so much at the time, but looking back on it, I feel like I could have taken a lot more care here. And actually, I'm looking at it with the, you know, creating the flowers and the leaf shapes while I'm putting down that white. However, looking at it now, I actually think I could have used I could have made a lot more of that. And actually, if I'd ignored the flowers and the leaves and actually thought about creating some abstract shapes and sort of thinking of the composition of the negative space, you know, the white parts that aren't the flowers and the leaves, I think I actually could have made this something quite special. So that's what I'm doing next time. I'm going to be so much more aware of the negative space. So with those flowers, they're kind of lots and lots of flowers stuck together, and it makes like a big ball. So we're not putting lots of detail in, we're being very loose. And so I'm just doing some curly loops to represent those big blue flowers. Now here, this is Paynes Grey and burnt umber, raw umber mixed together. And what I'm doing is, so that white negative space, I'm kind of putting in some shadow areas because we need some dark as well as some light. Now, again, this is... I'm not overly thinking about where I'm putting these. It's kind of intuitive. I'm not sure I put them in the best places, but it is... We're definitely getting it looking a bit more like there's a big tangle of leaves going on. I've put on quite a lot of the paint there, and while it's still wet, I'm just using my paint towel to take some of it back off. Now this is, I think it's burnt umber Liquitex Acrylic ink. It's translucent. I've put on a bit much. I've went a bit crazy. But it really does help add some more interest into the leaves, gives them more, you know, we've got lots of greens, we've got the kind of light areas, the dark areas, and now we're getting some really dark structured lines in as well. Just trying to take a bit of the excess, but really I need to wait for this to dry. I spin the video to indicate drying times. This is me just adding a bit more detail here. This took a good hour to dry because I'd put so much out. So this is Saffron Yellow watercolour out of the Kuretake set. Now it's a very bright yellow. It's quite a dark yellow, but it's still very bright. So some of it I'm mixing in with that umber acrylic ink. And then some of it's staying out just as the yellow. But I wanted to add the yellow in because it adds a lot of brightness. Now this has been dried, and this is more of the green watercolours I used before. And what I'm doing is I'm just bringing those same colours back out into the fore. You know, the front of the picture. So we're definitely in the ugly stage right now. It's chaotic. There's lots going on. There's a lack of definition. It just looks like you could give up at this point. But I promise you it does turn out very nice. And you've got to go through this stage. You've got to... We want to make this look like a really big, interesting bunch of flowers with really interesting tangled leaves. And, you know, we need to do quite a few layers to make that happen. We also need to bring colours into different areas of the pictures. So I'm putting some of that pink watercolour down, but then I'm mixing it in with some of the pea green, the lighter green, so that it's not like a pink flower. It's just like maybe there's a shadow in one of the leaves and it casts off a bit of a pink glow. Or it could be that, you know, one of the flowers, the light from one of the flowers is bouncing off one of the leaves. So it's very, very subtle. Just adding a bit more texture onto that clay pot. And again, adding some of that into the very subtle. And then what I'll do again is those orangey clay pot soft pastel bits I put throughout the flowers and the leaves, I'll go over with other colours as well. So I'm just doing a bit more negative painting here. I've made this lovely grey. I couldn't recreate that if I tried. It's probably a bit of the Paynes grey and umber coming through on the white because they were on the same palette, but it could be a mix of the other colours that I've used as well. So this is the kind of mid phase, I would say, and it's the kind of dance area. This is the bit where you go backwards and forwards between doing sort of the leaves, the flowers, the negative painting, putting in shadows, putting in light, and you just go backwards and forwards. Kind of trying to make it come alive. This is also the part where I tend to go a bit over the score. So with the blue flowers, I feel like I did a bit too much to them. But with the rest of the painting, I think, you know, I did get the balance right. And that's another thing you're doing with the sort of dance. While you're putting in sort of more details and you're getting it looking more pleasant as a whole, you're also trying to get it so that it feels balanced. as in all the elements, you know, like the lines, the shapes, the values, the colours, etc, etc. So I'm really using a lot of the soft pastels and oil pastels in this stage. I think I'm finished with the watercolours now because there's that much oil pastel down that the watercolour probably won't sit very well on top of it. And it's kind of done its job already. We've had that nice kind of using the oil pastel to keep watercolour in certain areas, etc. So there's quite a few layers now where the watercolour will struggle to kind of stay on the painting and would probably get quite muddy. So really it's only the white acrylic paint and the mix of the Paynes grey and the umber that we use now paint wise. It's mostly soft pastels and oil pastels. So part of me wishes that I'd actually left the flowers as they were, because I think that the finished picture with those kind of unfinished flowers, it would have made them look more delicate. But I'll know for next time. I like using the soft pastel too, because what happens is because of the oil pastel that's down and the fact some of the paint's still wet, it's actually hard to get the soft pastel to go down in some areas, and it can leave quite delicate, very subtle strokes. And I think for somebody that's heavy-handed like myself, that's actually a very good thing. So I can still apply lots of pressure and be heavy-handed, but I can get a nice delicate mark from it. Obviously I'm using an oil pastel just now. I noticed it from before. I think this is sapphire blue. And the white oil pastel, now these are Mungyo oil pastels. I love them. I think for the price, they're a very good quality oil pastel. But I bought a pack of 6 Paul Rubens oil pastels, white ones, and I don't like the way that they feel when they're on the paper. They go on lovely. They behave very, very lovely when you're using them. But I feel that they dry very sticky on. I just don't like how they feel on the finished picture. I don't think that, maybe it's just because I'm used to the Mungyo. But I'm going to have to branch out and buy some Mungyo white oil pastels. I'm trying to stay true to the curly loops on these flowers, and it's not easy. I can tell I was liking this picture because of the fact that I'm using the Mungyo white oil pastel and not the Paul Rubens. So this stage does take a while because you just go into the zone, you know, you're sitting and you're just going backwards and forwards. You add something and you see how that affects the rest of the picture, and you go back to the rest of the picture and it's just backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. But I think this is the stage where the magic happens. The early stages, when you're kind of laying down, you know, the composition and the colour palette, etc., is you have to get that right to be able to do this stage. But you have to spend time on this stage as well. But when the picture's going very well, you want to spend time in this stage because you're just, the ideas, you're almost thinking ahead. When you're doing one mark, you're thinking to yourself, oh, I could do that there. I like this stage when it's working. When it's not working, and you feel like you're actually doing a repair job, which I feel quite often. That's it's hard doing this stage. But I didn't have that with this. This was, this was good. This was actually where you had ideas where you're thinking, will I do this or that? It's kind of like choosing paths to go down. Instead of thinking, oh, how am I going to fix that? So this is me coming back in and doing a bit more of the negative painting. So in my mind, this negative painting is very much about creating the structure of the flowers and the leaves. Because the colours, I'm very much using the colours as the, creating the textures, creating the feel, creating the chaos that I can then use the, the white paint to draw lines around, basically. That's how it feels. That's just a fluid white paint. I just found it a bit easier than the heavy body because it's kind of like easier to place it. Whereas with the heavy body, I find I have to do quite a few more strokes. So therefore, I'm more likely to mess up my lines. I found it easier to create a sharper edge with it. So up the top, it takes me a while because I definitely get the white paint a lot darker up the top. But I do manage to balance it out. And at the end of the day, it is a bit darker up there overall, because we've got those big leaves at the bottom that are the lightest. And it's not just about going round the outside. While we've got a big tangled bouquet, and that's what we want, we still need some flashes of light and dark coming through it. And this is the bit that next time I do this that I want to spend a lot more time on, because I want to think more about the actual negative shapes that I'm making rather than the flowers and the leaves, if that makes sense. Almost like the flowers and the leaves are there to support the abstract negative shapes. I think that would be interesting, and if it doesn't work, well, that's okay, but I think that it would be it'd be quite a nice concept to try. And when you get these ideas, I think that's what art's all about. It's about experimenting and pushing, trying new things and pushing ideas further. So here I do take quite a lot of the leaves away. But because there's so much going on in the leaves that are left, and I'm still trying to keep interesting shapes, it does give the illusion that there's a lot more there than there is. I have left the majority of what I do on the videos so that, if you wanted to follow along, that you definitely could. But some of the processes are a bit time consuming, like this one, and it can seem a bit repetitive. But I think it's important for you to see the kind of how it goes from the chaos to the, to how powerful the white paint is in creating the structure. And I like kind of going round and creating the interesting leaf shapes. And I like how the white paint almost, that gives the illusion of being leaves itself. And of course, I'm going to go back, when this white paint dries, I will go back over some of it. It's almost like doing another phase of what we've just done. We'll add some more chaos of the leaves back in. This is all part of the dance, the backwards and forwards. And it's very enjoyable, and it's very mindful as well. It's very relaxing. Just because when you're doing this, you're actually making quite big changes. So it's quite, you're really thinking a lot, and it does, you know, you're not thinking about other stuff. You're thinking about this. I think next time as well, I'd like to try this with, I mean, that's a small paintbrush for me, but maybe trying it with a smaller paintbrush. I'm doing my curly loops the wrong way round there. Do you see that? They should be going the other way. We also do some sgraffito into the paint. Unfortunately, some of it's a bit too dry, but in areas where it was still wet, we got some grey marks. So that just gives the kind of loose, you know, I can't remember what they're called. They're stems and stalks kind of look. And it can also feel a bit like, oh, I've done so much work and I'm covering it up. But what was underneath is it's given, it's not just a stark flat white. And also when we sgraffito into it, we're going to bring some of that back out. And then we're also going to add more oil pastel and soft pastel back in. But we're also highlighting, you know, the kind of complex marks that we've already made by having a lot of negative space. Kind of showcasing it rather than just having it all there as a big blob. So this is me just adding in some darker areas. I'm trying to be strategic because I can be very heavy-handed. I think this is an area I struggle with. I know this is an area I struggle with about where to put the kind of darker areas. So I've really just chosen one side of, you know, a leaf or a flower, and I'm very much just intuitively thinking about the balancing out of the darks and the lights. Intuitively thinking doesn't mean I'm correct. It's just me thinking that's the best place I think is for it. I think the top left hand side, it's the negative space is starting to look like a hand a bit. So this is a dry, big, soft watercolour paintbrush, and I'm just using it to kind of smooth the darker paints into the lighter paint. I'm using it to help me blend. So that's dried, and I'm going over the negative space again with the white paint to give it a bit more. Well, we don't want it to look flat. It was just to make it a bit more blended, basically, overall. So I'm adding some sgraffito to the flowers because they've obviously lost their shape and size a wee bit with what I was doing. although that's okay. Part of me actually considered making them quite a solid shape. And I'm just using a blunt skewer to, as it's a smaller point, to do the pink flowers. So this is me doing the sgraffito part now, and some areas the paint's just too dry. And in some areas it's just wonderful. It's nice having the sgraffito marks in though, because that definitely adds just another area of interest. And see, because you're bringing out the colours that were already there. It's not like you've just got a green pencil and drew up it. And I'm using the palette knife to try and get a thicker line in areas. I could have done with the paint being a bit more wet, but I probably would have scraped all the white paint off if it had still been wet. I do go a bit over the top. One thing about these flowers, so the one on the right has stayed smaller, but I feel that the other two would have benefited from being different sizes. The other two have ended up both being quite large, and one of them was supposed to be more of a medium. I think the top one was supposed to be a bit smaller. But I'll know for next time to be more careful of that. I do regret putting so much oil pastel on these, because I have lost a lot of the blue from underneath with the watercolours. But then maybe they're still shown through and they're just very subtle. So I'm very much just trying to do sort of finishing touches to the flowers and the leaves. So we're kind of doing the dance again, but we're doing it on a smaller scale. This is when I was talking about the soft pastels, like pressing very hard but not getting much of a result. That's what's happening here. And I think it just added some lovely shadows into the flowers that was missing. And I'm just flattening it over with the palette knife. So I really liked this process, and I would like to try it with, you know, just completely abstract. Although I think until I'm a bit more used to it, I probably would start with something representational and then try and do the abstract around it more. Not sure if I've added too much white just now. The leaves at the bottom are my favourites. I like the brightness of them. I feel like it's definitely, even though they've got the big blue and pink flowers, I do feel that the bottom leaves, especially the one on the left, is the focal point of the picture. This is me trying hard not to destroy the leaves at the bottom. So we do add in quite a bit here, and I also add in some more yellow. And then I bring a bit of purple into the flowers as well to balance the yellow. And I think overall that the yellow and the purple was a very, very, very good addition. That's a kind of light brown oil pastel. I'm being careful because I'm trying not to destroy what I've done. I am very aware that I'm more than capable of destroying it. So again, this is quite a dark, bright yellow oil pastel. I think it matches quite well to the saffron yellow Art Nouveau Kuretake watercolour. And I do think it helps bring this picture alive. And I think the bottom leaf, because it's such a pale green, I think adding the yellow round about it has really helped emphasise the paleness of that leaf, but in a way that it's still cohesive with the rest of the painting. It's not like I've made that leaf very pale and everything else is dark and therefore there's contrast. It's a bit more subtle. So that's me just blending in the bits of the purple. So after this, I'm going to go round the negative space again with the white paint, and then that's it done. Now this was supposed to be a quick, loose 20-minute painting, but it never ends. It never ends that way for me. So it's, you know, it ended up quite a lot more complex, but I was very happy with it. Really happy with it, actually. And I feel like I made some progress with my painting with it. So I'm using a smaller brush, and it's got a flat head, which is helping me define the edges a bit more. Because the painting's so loose and chaotic, I think having some of the sharp edges to the negative space helps balance it. And I think that it also emphasises the chaoticness of, you know, the leaves and the flowers. So that's it. Oh, and I love the clay pot. The clay pot, top tip, draw a basket. So that's it finished. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And take care, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.